Treating seed this spring? AGI Storm FX brings you the ultimate innovation in seed treating for your modern-day farming operation, offering you speed, accuracy, and flexibility. With a simplified design, gentle handling, and precise performance, you can choose to pre-treat or treat your seed just in time. This season, choose the AGI Storm FX seed treater to keep you on schedule and ahead of the curve. Visit aggrowth.com for more information or to find your nearest dealer.
Hi, I'm Caitlin Dubin, and this is the Rural Woman Podcast. I'm a first-generation farmer who married into agriculture. Born and raised in a city, I was so unfamiliar with where my food came from, but I was determined to figure it out. Through my journey into agriculture, I saw women who were strong but humble, often taking a back seat. To me, these women were leaders who deserved a seat at the table. I created the Rural Woman Podcast to share the voices of women in an industry whose stories often went untold. The rural entrepreneurs who live and breathe their work, full of grit and pride. We come here to share our stories, to be in community with each other, to be challenged and inspired, but most importantly, to be celebrated and to be heard. We may not all live, farm, ranch, or homestead the same, but we are all connected. We are rural women, and our stories are worthy of being told. Hey everyone, welcome to this week's episode of the Rural Woman Podcast. This week, you'll meet Simone Weinstein. Simone's passion for the environment started early. Climbing trees and studying snakes led them to study environment and business at the University of Waterloo and then to the nonprofit world. Simone made the leap from the classic 9-to-5 to self-employment when they joined their partner, Celeste, who we heard from last week, at the Conscious Kitchen. They were working in sustainable food consulting and loved working with food and entrepreneurs, but knew they were missing something. Now working with their partner, Celeste, Simone loves being able to practice sustainability with each purchase from a local farm and to shape the direction of the business. Simone's favorite thing when helping entrepreneurs is to get grounded in their financials of a business. With a love of numbers and the analytics, bookkeeping is something that brings them great joy. By making sense of the books, Simone strives to give business owners the knowledge and tools to help build a business that supports the business owners, employees, and the community. Their goal is to help build sustainable businesses that don't lead to burnout because they have seen that happen far too often. I am so excited to share Simone's story with you all on the Rural Woman Podcast. I got to meet Simone through the conference that Celeste Lapriato and Simone put together, which was titled Not Your Father's Farm Conference, which obviously caught my eye. And it was such a great conference that I continue to talk about to this day. And I cannot wait for the 2023 conference, which you are going to hear about today. Before we get to Simone's interview, let's go over this week's listener review. This week's 5-star rating and review comes from Slim D. Bale via Apple Podcast, and it is titled, Wish I Started Sooner. I've always seen things about the Rural Woman Podcast, but always just scrolled on, forgetting about it. Day after day, week after week, and then this year I decided to start listening to more podcasts while doing mundane things. I finally downloaded the podcast and started at the newest episode, and I've been working my way back through the old ones, and wow, I wish I would have started listening sooner. I finally feel like I found a group of people that actually understand me. I truly appreciate this podcast. Every episode I've listened to so far has moved me, gave me a new perspective, given me some helpful tips, and even made me cry. So thank you for this. Well, thank you so much for this kind rating and review, and I hope those were good tears, happy tears. Thank you so much for your kind rating and review over on Apple Podcasts. And my friends, I would encourage you to leave a rating and review wherever it is that you listen to the podcast, as this helps other folks like you find the show and spread the good word of women in agriculture. Before we get to today's episode, I just want to say a quick, warm welcome to our newest member of the Patreon community, Michelle P. Michelle joins us at Tier 10 over on Patreon, which means she gets access to bonus content, including extended episodes, patron-only episodes, and I'm sure she is enjoying my most recent episode of Maybe You Can Relate, which is the one about speaking your truth. My next episode is recorded and ready to be released later this month, and it's titled The One About Being a Female Farmer. You're not going to want to miss that one. So if you are able, please consider supporting my work through the Rural Woman podcast on Patreon. This membership-based platform gives you a little bit extra each month and helps me so much financially to support my team and the production of the Rural Woman podcast. To learn more, you can head to patreon.com/the Rural Woman podcast, or just scroll down on your listening app and click the link in the show notes. Without further ado, my friends, let's get to this week's interview with Simone. Simone, welcome to the podcast. I am so excited to get to know you better and to share your story with my audience.
Thank you so much for having me.
This is not the first time I've got to sit down virtually with you. I recently attended an online conference that you hosted with your partner, Celeste. And we're going to talk about that conference today because I've been gushing about it, I think, ever since, and telling everybody what a great online conference it was. But before I fangirl, tell us more about yourself and how you particularly got your start in agriculture.
Sure, yeah. So thanks again for having me on the podcast. My name is Simone. I use they, them pronouns, and my partner, Celeste, and I, we live in Ontario, Canada, on Soggy Ojibwe Nation territory. And we moved up to where we are now, our 5-acre rural property, about a year and a half ago. We were living in kind of like a medium-sized city for a few years. Celeste just finished undergrad studying environmental governance. I was working at a food sustainability consulting company. And so we both kind of had experience working in and I guess supporting like food and agriculture companies. So she had been interning on organic farms and working in bakeries and food banks. And then I was kind of just on like the consulting side of food and ag. So we had that similar and like shared passion. And she started her farm to table food business about a year after graduating. And that was really inspired by the idea of sourcing from local kind of family run farms who we'd be getting our CSAs, community shared agriculture, from for a few years. And so we had a lot of connections with local farmers. We weren't necessarily farming on our own because we were living in the city, but pretty connected to that kind of world. And so, so she started this company to like make, I guess, eating local food more convenient and accessible for people that perhaps didn't want to get the raw veggies and cook them themselves. So kind of taking that away, that away from them, doing it for them. And so I guess about a year later, both of us were kind of like farming somewhat like part-time or volunteer or kind of recreationally. And we did want to buy a home and move. Well, actually not buy a home. We were going to live in the tiny home, but that's a whole other story. But we wanted to, move a bit outside the city, somewhere that we'd have some acreage to farm ourselves and eventually kind of transition a bit more rurally and somewhere that we actually could see raising our family. So that's how, long story short, I guess we ended up where we are now. The housing market kind of brought us to where we are. It's a little bit further away from really like our community and what we knew. It's about an hour and a half from, I guess, like an hour and a half drive really from all our friends. So we've had to kind of start over and like build a community up here. But yeah, we're growing just a 1/4 acre, like mixed veg, and Celeste wants to do flowers this year as well. And we run our food business from our commercial kitchen that's like on the property.
Yeah. It's such an interesting business. And I just love the idea behind what you're doing and bringing local food to people in a different way. And not only the food that you're producing on your acreage, but also the surrounding area. And, when we think of the typical farm to table, we think of CSA and we think of raw veggies and all of the other things, but we don't really think about, well, what if we took the next step and actually cooked that food and brought it to them, which to me sounds dreamy. Having to be the cook here for about 8 months of the year when I'm cooking for an entire crew all of the time. So having somebody to cook that for me would even be better. But Simone, what are some of your first memories around food from when you were a kid growing up? Did you have a garden? Did you produce food? Where did you think your food came from?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say I was pretty disconnected from the food system. So my parents, I guess they immigrated here from South Africa. So they kind of their, I guess, grandparents immigrated from Eastern Europe. So by the time my family came here, we're living in the suburbs north of Toronto. Yeah, just pretty disconnected from like local food, the land here, and food growing up. So I'm also Jewish. So I guess food growing up, like a big part of our week was Friday night dinner. So that consisted of like challah, which is like the kneaded bread, grape juice, like some sort of soup, I guess traditionally like a matzo ball soup, and then a classic like, meat and potatoes, and then a dessert. So yeah, food, Friday night dinners were always like a time for the family to come together. And we'd always have like different kind of family friends come over. We didn't have too much family here. So there was always like family friends coming over. And then, yeah, just various Jewish holidays, always obviously looking forward to like the food aspect of holidays. So it was definitely like food was a big part of our life, but perhaps too, because all of the customary foods didn't like come from this land, it was, somewhat like it was disconnected. Yeah.
I love hearing those stories of people growing up and their understanding of where their food came from. I grew up in a very agricultural rich place, and I myself had no idea where my food came from. I thought it came from the grocery store. I didn't know that people 25 minutes away from me were producing this food that eventually somehow got to the grocery store. I had no idea how. And I think over the last couple of years, everyone has really realized how far food has to go to get places when you don't focus on finding local sources of food. So you yourself were working in the food industry somewhat before you started farming yourself. So what was it in your older years that drew you to working in the agriculture industry?
I guess like my, let's say like educational background was in like environment and business. So I was like passionate always about the natural world. And then I guess I'm a very like analytical person. So the business, like financial side was kind of like a skill set that I always had. So I had like the passion for the natural worlds, and then, like maybe the more practical skills. So I think like there's so many, I guess, industries that you can go into with that skill set, but I don't know. I think that the food and agriculture industry is something that's like the most connected to the land and I guess to the natural world. And to me, it's something that like I was passionate about and passionate understanding more about, and could just really like connect to emotionally and just participate in. So I guess that's what drew me to the work. And I think what I realized like I loved the most as I was working with different food and farm companies and organizations and people was I really liked working with some of like the smaller and I guess more startup companies that were, I guess it was kind of bringing some of their like cultural foods, to the wider audience, or again, just like had that passion and that like emotional connection to what they were doing. So that was the kind of work in like the food and farm businesses that I really loved working with.
Yeah. And I like how you described it as an emotional connection, because similar to your Friday night dinners with your friends and family, was the food good? Most likely, but it was the emotional connection that brought you to the table to share that meal with people. And I think for me, as a person who didn't grow up this way, now fully immersed into it, that's still one of my favorite things. And some of my favorite memories are around the kitchen table, regardless if I knew, how that food got there or not. It was the connection that brought us all back. So
I personally am a terrible cook, like absolutely terrible. So I guess I like surrounding myself too with, like Celeste is obviously an amazing cook. And yeah, so surrounding myself with other people that are really good at that is a good place to be.
Well, and when you're thinking of farming is a business. And if you're good at the numbers, then that is just a harmonious partnership, because if you can find somebody who thinks numbers are sexy and somebody else who is good at growing food and good at cooking food, like I think match made in heaven. So tell us more about the products that you are producing on your acreage.
So last year was our first, I guess, growing season on our land. So let's had a few different plots in different places in Guelph. So last season, it was a mix of different veggies, most of them for preserving. So it was kind of like a smaller scale. Last year was more, I guess, for ourselves, because it's really rocky where we are. So we got it tilled, but it definitely needed, I guess, a lot more TLC than I guess we had the time and energy to do. So it was a bit of a smaller, I think we had like 4 or 5 beds last year. And this year we're planning on doing the full 1/4 acre. But so last year, a lot of peppers, a lot of squash. I guess squash was typically just very happy, and like pumpkins. So those just took over. And so we had some beautiful like jack-o'-lantern pumpkins, lots of, peppers, different like salsas and hot sauces, tomatillos, just like a variety of, I guess, like fun and maybe more interesting things that you might not necessarily find elsewhere. And I think that's really what Celeste is trying to grow this year. I think she said she has purchased like over 100 different varieties of seeds. So there's going to be, I think, a lot of different things growing. Like they said, flowers are going to be added, and she wants to start like a farm and flower box in particular. So people can add on to their prepared meals. They can add on, some flowers and some of like our own farm produce onto their order. So that's what we're going to try this coming summer.
I love that. And I'm also super jealous of all of your customers who get the opportunity to support you, because I just think the idea of going that extra step to do what other companies they're doing. They're buying produce from farmers and they're buying products from their local farmers, and they are creating meal subscription services. We've all heard of HelloFresh and those types of things. And then I'm thinking, even to myself, I'm thinking of Skip the Dishes or DoorDash, having that convenience of food coming to you. And it's harmoniously all in one company, and that's the Conscious Kitchen. You have recently become more hands-on with the Conscious Kitchen, leaving your full-time employment to pursue these opportunities. What was it about the specific business itself that really drew you in, that you were like, yeah, this is it. This is what we're going to do. We're all in.
Yeah, there's like a pretty answer, and then maybe a more like real, not so pretty answer. I mean, and I guess both happened at the same time. Like, part of it was I kind of got burnt out at my full-time job. And so we had this long-term plan for me to eventually, join business, but actually less so join the business and more like start our own business coaching business and support other food and farm businesses and like making a living from their business, ethically and sustainably. That's our little tagline. So that was kind of the long-term vision. So have like that, like the consulting side of things. But honestly, what sped up the process last year was I was getting a bit burnt out at my consulting job. I really liked, obviously, working with food and farm companies, and it was kind of trying to help them, be a bit more sustainable, but also just like overall kind of run their business, I guess, like more strategically, let's say. But I did feel that a lot of the time it was like very slow moving. So with like a lot of big companies kind of trying to get larger companies to change it takes more time than I perhaps would have liked. But also it was, I guess just like internal things, the company, I was just kind of getting burnt out. And then at the same time, Celeste was looking at hiring a delivery driver. We needed someone to do deliveries 3 days a week. And we live in a pretty, rural place. So the employment pool is not very large. There's some, like the closest city, I guess, or town, city has like 100,000 people. It's about a half hour away. Anyways, we put out postings and this and that. And it was like 1 month or two, and we weren't really getting like any decent applicants. So it was, okay, me thinking I'm kind of burnt out and want to change. And then us not being able to find someone reliable, because I was so critical. I mean, if we can't get our product to customers, like that's an issue. Celeste couldn't do it. She had no time. So honestly, I think we were like walking our dogs, and I was just like, what if I left Provision, that was the company, and joined you and became that delivery driver? And then we kind of crunched the numbers and realized that like we could make it work. I would have to find another part-time job, but we could make it work. So it was a bit of that leap. Like, I think when I told my boss I was quitting, I think she said that she'd always thought it would happen, but maybe she didn't think it happened, like would happen when it did. And kind of neither did I. But made that leap just to kind of solve a problem and pushed us to, I guess, fast track some of our plans. And we're still on that journey for sure.
Those feelings are incredibly scary. It's something that I went through myself. I had a fancy job, had a business card, a nameplate and everything. And when it was like, I'm going to quit and learn how to drive a tractor. I don't know if anybody believed me or they thought I would be back in 6 months. And here I am about 5 years later, still driving the tractor. So
I know it definitely does feel weird when you're leaving kind of more of that, secure and somewhat, like, and when you tell, like it's seemingly more impressive, let's say, right? But really, kind of like evaluating lifestyle and all these kind of things. Instead, like what's really important.
1,000%. So, and you're talking about crunching numbers, and you and Celeste did amazing presentations during your online conference, which we'll still get to. We're working our way there, but you have had significant growth over the last couple years in the Conscious Kitchen. And with growth comes some growing pains. So can you speak to some of the challenges that you have faced in growing your business?
Definitely growing pains. I feel like Celeste and I were just kind of talking through some of those things this weekend because, we're definitely right now in like a growth point where we're about to take on like a lot of debt to kind of get to that next step. And it does feel like three things have to happen at the same time, right? Like it's like this very perfectly lined up dominoes. Like one thing has to happen for the other to happen. So I guess just to maybe, share what is upcoming. And then because that's closest to my mind, then maybe I can think of some of the things in the past. But right now, there's two big bottlenecks. One is in our truck, like our van. We have 3 days of delivery, and obviously as much as you can fit in the van is like as much as you can sell. So we're kind of reaching the capacity of our van. So we are going to be buying like a Ford Transit, the biggest you can buy. And that's like $90,000 that we'll be financing. So it's like, okay, we're going to take that on, and that'll be happening like in the next few months. I think we put in the order like 6 months ago or something, and it's going to be coming soon. Then in our kitchen's on our property in the basement, and with a rural property zoning can allow you to run your business, from your property, which is pretty great. But it's getting pretty tight down there, and it's not the best like working environment. I mean, it's a basement. There's not that many windows. So again, yeah, and it's getting tight. So we're also going to be expanding the kitchen this summer, building it out 10 feet. And so that's another over $100,000 to expand that. And then to do all that, and as we're growing, we're going to really need another staff member. So I think a big stress for Celeste is that she's kind of doing and taking on like definitely all of like the brain power of the business. So there's a lot sitting on her shoulders. I know she feels a lot of pressure, and it's like if she is sick, if she got injured, like the business would honestly have to stop. We do have another employee and myself, but we really like assist. We're not really like the mental, and also just like the execute. Celeste works really fast, cooks really fast, all this kind of thing. So we're going to need to hire someone that has that kind of level of like managerial and like culinary experience. So that's like, I guess 3 big things that are going to need to happen this year. But I guess like we want the first 2 to happen before hiring someone, so that it's like a good work environment, and Celeste can kind of free up some of her mind to like train this person. So that feels, I think, quite like daunting and stressful to find that right person, and then also get this like expansion done this year. So I think there's a lot of stress and weight sitting on Celeste's shoulders, and I'm helping as I can. And I think that's another thing that just like over the past year, Celeste and I have had to learn how to work together. I mean, I think it's like working with your partner. I mean, for us, I see it as like a blessing, because I think we're able to be more like vulnerable with each other than I would probably be able to do with someone that we don't have this close of a relationship. So it feels like sometimes there's really hard days or big emotions, but we're like able to really express that and like kind of get past it, right? Because like with business comes, a ton of emotions. So being able to get past it, but then it definitely does, test that kind of communication, trust, being able to not talk about business, like set boundaries, make that time to also like enjoy yourself, and get away. So all of that has been happening in the past year too. So there's a lot of challenges and growing pains.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and farming with your family or your partner or really whomever, it's stressful. There's so many elements outside of your control. And then put on top an ever-growing business that you have to adjust for, pay for, all of these things. It can be really stressful. It can be all-consuming, and finding that time to just be together and not worry as much and do something fun to get your mind off of things are so important. But I want to flip that question now. And what are some wins that you want to celebrate, that you are proud of, that you have both accomplished in the Conscious Kitchen?
I think I guess I'll speak for Celeste. Maybe I shouldn't, but I'll speak for Celeste, where it's like her personality is like maybe not to celebrate how great she's doing. like maybe, like super, super humble about things, let's say, or just kind of, perhaps that's just that, I guess, somewhat of self-doubt, but it's more like, it's pretty natural to focus on the things that go bad. But anyways, that's to say, like, Celeste might not celebrate as easily what she's accomplished. But for me, kind of looking in, because like I think it's important to distinguish most of the success, 99.99% of the success, the true success of the Conscious Kitchen is because of like Celeste's hard work. So I'm coming into it as like this proud partner, and I always love to like talk highly of Celeste because I really like admire and respect her so much. But I think like a huge win is just, I guess, starting quite small. I mean, starting with, let's say, I think she put in $7,000 of her own dollars. She found a commercial kitchen for rent in Guelph, and she reached out to another business to share the space with her so that it could be more affordable. And then it started with like 2 customers kind of that were coming and bringing their own containers and this and that. And just slowly and steadily started to grow a customer base, right? And just kind of keep expanding, and just the amount of work I think that it does take to start a small business on your own, and just to keep at it, like to keep showing up day after day. And you read the customer review and someone's not happy, but you have to keep going anyways. I think just overall, I think a win is just like showing up every day and like keeping going, because now that I've kind of stepped into a role as like a quote unquote, entrepreneur, like business owner, I think I've just really come to appreciate like how hard it is, like how hard it really is to, just keep going, because there's constantly decisions to be made. Constantly there's issues, or there's complaints, or there's this and there's that. And there's no one really giving you that like encouragement. Like there's really no one saying good job. You just you're going to hear the bad. So I feel like just keeping going is like a huge win.
And that is completely fair.
And I'm really impressed with everyone.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah. I mean, to put a number on it, I mean, we're now at like $350,000 of revenue a year. So that feels cool. That feels good.
Yeah. That's amazing, considering starting with, the 2 customers and to where it's grown today. And I know Celeste is busy working right now in the kitchen. And I hope that she takes a moment when she hears this to really sit back and go, wow, yeah, I did that. So good job, Celeste.
Hopefully.
Yeah. Okay. So now the much awaited anticipation. Let's talk about the conference that you and Celeste hosted this past winter. The conference itself was something that like my eyes immediately went to, because I was like, oh, this sounds spicy. It was called Not Your Father's Farm Conference. So immediately I was like, well, that sounds like something for me. So tell us the idea, or how the idea came about for you to host such a conference.
I think, we definitely wanted to make it a little spicy, right? And to, catch attention. So it basically, the idea was inspired after, for a few years, Celeste in particular had been attending a lot of farming conferences, and just felt that, I guess, most of the speakers looked a certain way. Maybe I guess I can name, there was like a lot of white men talking about farming. And then it was like the people of color, the women of color were kind of designated to talk about like race or racism in farming. So just, wanted to create something that centered all of like the brilliant women, trans, non-binary voices that are in the farming space that perhaps didn't get centered in those conferences. Although I think definitely there has been a lot of improvement in diversity in farming conferences overall. But I think in centering, I guess, like women, trans, non-binary folks, and then with special, I guess, focus on like BIPOC and queer, I think, there's something about creating that space that it's almost like you come into it having to explain one less thing, or having to like justify or prove one less thing about why you're here and why people should listen to you, right? And why you're an expert. It's like, by creating this conference, it's for, women, trans, non-binary farmers. It's like, yeah, obviously women, have something to say about farming and have so much expertise. And really, we tailored it to the business side of things. So it's like, right, it's just like, yeah, obviously we have a lot to say. We, have a lot to share. But then I think also we did it because we could perhaps address certain issues that perhaps women plus folks, it's unique to that experience. I think we talked about, yes, certain things like that come up around like money, let's say, or imposter syndrome or this or that. So kind of creating that space too, to like bring somewhat some foundation of like a shared experience that we can kind of get into those experiences a little more than perhaps like a conference where there's not that intention.
Well, and I like what you said, and it explains it perfectly. You just took that layer out for the people who were presenting. They didn't have to prove that they needed to be there. Where I've found going to conferences as a privileged white female, as an attendee, most of the people on stage are men. And if they aren't, then they are, like you said, speaking specifically about a topic that would be relevant to their race or their gender, and not kind of talking in their expertise necessarily, because they are there to prove that maybe that, we are diverse, we are inclusive, we are doing all of the right things. We are checking the boxes of hosting a conference in the year of 2020, 21, all of these things, right? But not giving them the stage to, talk about what they're really good at. And the thing that I loved specifically about the conference was there was so much tangible information. And I have to give you kudos to that, because the presentations, I still have my notebook full of actual knowledge that I took from that, of things that I can use for our farm and for our business. Whereas there'll be times I go to these other conferences and I'll go and sit through presentations, and it's really like, I love it when people share their story and I get the background of them and who they are and all of these things. But if I'm not learning something from you besides whatever your story was, like I want both. I want a mixture of both. And that's what I got from your conference. So I'm just excited to be able to fangirl about this with you and say what an incredible job you did to host this conference. And there were so many people that were there, and just the energy that I felt. And, it's the year 2022. We've all sat through however many Zoom conferences and calls for the last however many years. Like, it can get really tiring. But honestly, at the end of yours, I still felt there was energy in the room, even if I was sitting here all by myself. So it was really good.
Well, thank you so much. Yeah, really, really appreciate that. Because, yeah.
So my next question would be, and I'm sure everyone listening, is there going to be another one?
Yes, I can, I guess, as confidently as I can say at this point, yes, we definitely are planning to have a 2023. And I think the fact, there were so many attendees that came that we didn't know before. Like, we've connected with so many amazing farmers like yourself, who I think we're like, they could be a speaker and they could be a speaker and they could be a speaker. I think just, knowing and meeting so many knowledgeable, amazing, inspiring farmers that could be speakers, right? And share is that encouragement to do it again, right? Like, there's so many people out there to connect with and to learn from and to share.
Well, I'll be waiting for that announcement of when it is, and we will be sure to let the listeners know when the 2023 conference will be.
Oh, thank you.
You can help support the stories of women in agriculture to be shared through the Rural Woman podcast on Patreon. What is Patreon? It's a membership-based platform that helps fund and support creators like me to create and produce content like this that you all love. New to the Rural Woman Podcast Patreon is ad-free listening and patron-only bonus content and exclusive episodes. Learn more and join the patron gang today at patreon.com/The Rural Woman Podcast. So part of your genius and your zone of genius you've talked about is the numbers and the business side of things. And you have started another business within the Conscious Kitchen business, and that is slow growing business coaching. So you are taking your genius and helping other farmers hone in the not so sexy numbers of farm and business and all of the things. So tell us more about the business coaching side of you.
So basically, so what inspired slow growing business coaching? Then we've kind of tagged on and bookkeeping, because we're offering those services too, we can take on your books. But on the business coaching side, I guess for us, what we really want to be able to share and support food and farm businesses in is creating a business that works for your lifestyle and helps you create the life that you want ethically and sustainably. So I think what we found is a lot of farm businesses aren't really able to pay themselves or their employees a proper living wage. And I think this is just a big systemic problem in the food space overall. And there are so many factors, right, that obviously can't just be solved, by an individual business owner. Everything from how subsidies are distributed and laws around migrant labor and things like this. There's so many systemic factors, but I guess around maybe the rhetoric around being a small scale farmer in particular, that space, I think there's a lot of perhaps misinformation, or it kind of makes it seem easy to make a living farming, where in fact most small scale farmers aren't able to pay themselves proper living wages and could only do it because maybe they got their land 10 years ago when it was really cheap and they have no mortgage, or, a low mortgage, or they inherited land or this or that. So at today's, let's say, market rates, the reality definitely in Ontario is that you can't actually afford to own and run a farming. That's kind of the stark reality where we are. But we don't quite see the education around that having caught up to that reality. And because even just 6 years ago, 10 years ago, I think things were different. So what we want to do is bring some of our experience and knowledge around running a value added farm food business to that space. So yeah, really what drives us, I think our unique skill set is in helping farmers maybe think about other products and offerings that they can add on that would give them better margins and grow a business where they can pay themselves properly, pay their employees properly, and just serve and reach more customers. And so, yeah, we bring up lots of we kind of want to be an open book. So we'll share everything we possibly can about how we did it in our business, right? The apps we use, this and that. And then also just general business planning, scenario planning, profit calculations, all that kind of stuff.
Well, it's funny because I always think of outside of agriculture looking in and how sexy farming can look. And we have seen the picture of the Instagram farmer in their flower fields twirling with baskets. And, it looks like it's really fun. And it can be. It is a super rewarding career. It's a lifestyle. It's all of these things. But at the end of the day, if you can't afford your lifestyle and all you're doing is working, I don't know what kind of life that is. So to look at the hard dollars and cents of the value of your product and what you're selling it for, if it's in a private market, or, if you are a commodities-based business where you are depending on other markets that dictate the price of whatever it is. Well, what else could you be doing that could be enhancing your bottom line, but also allowing you to live on a farm? And, if you wanted to go twirl in a field, you could, because you have the funds to go twirl in this field, right? So, and, this speaks to your conference and the people that were speaking there and everything, the transparency that you and Celeste both have with all parts of your business is something that, I wish they wrote a book on how you should be in egg business doing this, by sharing what you know with others, because the idea of having this knowledge and not being willing to share parts of it with other people, I've personally never understood that. I've never held the cards so close to me, but there are people that do. Looking back now in your experience, what would you tell young Simone, young entrepreneurial Simone? What advice would you give yourself or somebody looking to get into an entrepreneurial business in agriculture?
Maybe I'll just speak to broadly entrepreneurial. Like, what comes to mind is the mental space that takes up. I think, again, I'm fairly early on like the journey for myself personally. And I would tell myself that it is harder than you'd expect. I don't think I personally have like an entrepreneurial personality. I'm going to be totally honest. I am not decisive. I really do overthink a lot. And I guess like classic people pleaser, right? So I like being told what to do. It's kind of takes some of that pressure off me. Yeah, and I think I take criticism hard. So these are all recipes for disaster when it comes to being an entrepreneur. If that's you, and if you kind of recognize yourself in that, I think finding someone to go in it with you that can balance that out and support you in those ways is really important. So, maybe my tip to myself would be like, pick Celeste's brain more. Like Celeste, all of those things that I mentioned, like, most of them she can do. She's very decisive. I think she cares what people think, but she'll keep going anyways, I guess. So yeah, I think it's like, try to figure out how those people do it and what their mindset is, because I feel like when I share with Celeste how I'm feeling about something, or if something's hard or this or that, she is very clear with like an answer or a way to think about it. That's very helpful. So I'm trying to think of some of like her advice for me and channeling some of that. But I mean, some of it is like you're always going to disappoint people. Like you're truly always going to disappoint someone. Like almost every week, there's going to be someone that doesn't like something or this or that. So just expect that. That's okay. Yeah, maybe I'll leave it there. There's a million. There's many things.
I think like what I take from that is it's business, and don't take it super personally. I don't think you can take the personal aspect out of business ever, especially as an entrepreneur, because typically it's your business, which is kind of an essence of you. So that I think, don't take everything personally. And like you said, you're never going to please everybody all at the same time. And another thing, you had said, like, find somebody like Celeste. I just think like find community and find like-minded, passionate people who you can collaborate with, because I think, we're not good at everything as much as some people think they are. Like you have your zone of expertise. So focus on that part of your business and what you're good at. And then you can collaborate with people and work together, and you never know what kind of a magic you can come up with. Right. So I think, I think those are great things to tell baby Simone.
Yeah. And a big one is like talk about your feelings, right? It's like talk like, because so many, I think, emotions come up, especially in the early days of starting a business. So whether that's like with a therapist or with someone that you trust and who can offer that different opinion or way of looking at things is really helpful.
Absolutely. By this point, I'm sure I've bought my therapist a boat. So is there anything that you would like to share with the audience that I have not asked you?
No, I don't think so. Nothing in particular comes to mind.
Great. I did my job perfectly then. My last question for you is, what is the most rewarding part about being a rural entrepreneur for you?
I guess for all the challenges and pain that comes with it, I mean, physical pain from shoveling all this snow and just like emotional, I guess it is just like the journey of growth. It's like, I do feel sometimes, that I just look back and I do see like that personal growth. So whereas maybe something would have been caused a reaction, like I would have reacted to something, like 2 months ago, or it would have like affected me, now I can, let's say, read it and not be as phased. Like all of these little just personal milestones, I think, is rewarding. And it shows me that there's personal growth happening, which I think is kind of all we can ask for, is just like grow and learn and just kind of get to the other side of what life throws at us. And what's also really rewarding is just hanging out with my 2 dogs and 3 potbelly pigs. I don't think I definitely would have had potbelly pigs if I was living in the city, and they're pretty darn cute. So seeing them is pretty rewarding too.
I am low-key jealous of your potbelly pigs. I have goats, but I've said to my husband many a times that I really need a potbelly pig, and he's not quite convinced. I'll get him there.
They're adorable. They really are.
Thank you so much for sharing your story with me and our audience. And I am so happy that I was able to pick your brain about the nerdy side of business and entrepreneurship in rural life, because that is my second passion besides, farming and all of the things I love, the nerdy business stuff. For the listeners who would like to connect with you after the show, where can they find you online?
Depending on when this comes out, but our Instagram handle is The Conscious Farm Kitchen. And then, searching like Guelph or Kitchener Waterloo. Those might be keywords you need to like Google in case there's a few conscious kitchens. But right now the handle is The Conscious Farm Kitchen. And then Slow Growing Business Coaching is our other business. Yeah.
I will put the correct links in the bio for when the episode comes out so people can find you and connect with you. And I really hope for the folks that are listening who want to get nerdy and talk about all things business, they reach out to you, Simone, because you, like I said, you're a wealth of knowledge, and we're so lucky that you are able to share that with us. So thank you.
Oh, well, thanks so much for asking all these questions. It's always fun to talk about.
Yes, it's fun to talk about nerdy farm and business things. Thanks for listening to the Rural Woman Podcast, a proud member of the Positively Farming Media Podcast Network. The Rural Woman Podcast is more than just a podcast. We are a community. A huge thank you to the Rural Woman Podcast team, audio editor Max Hofer, and admin support from Kim & Co. Online. A special thanks to our Patreon executive producers, Sarah Riedner from Happiness by the Acre and Carrie Munven from Laystone Farms. To learn how you can become a Patreon executive producer or other ways to financially support the show, head on over to wildrosefarmer.com to learn more. Be sure to hit the follow or subscribe button wherever you listen to the podcast to get the latest episodes directly on your playlist. And if you are loving the show, please be sure to leave a rating and review on Apple Podcast or any other platform that accepts ratings and reviews. You can connect with us on social media at The Rural Woman Podcast and with me at Wild Rose Farmer. One of the best ways you can support the show is by sharing it. Send this episode to a friend or share on your social media. Let's strengthen and amplify the voices of women in agriculture together. Until next time, my friend, keep sharing your story. Did you know that you can get this same great episode of the Rural Woman Podcast ad-free? I get it. Listening to ads during a podcast isn't always my favorite either. But in order to keep the lights and coffee pot on here at the Rural Woman Podcast Studios, they are necessary. I am so grateful to each and every one of my sponsors, but if you yourself would like to skip the ads while supporting the show, consider joining me over on Patreon. Patrons of the Rural Woman Podcast get ad-free episodes starting at Tier 5 on their podcast player of choice each week, plus some other great benefits. Find out more by heading to the link in today's show notes to learn how you can become a patron through Patreon.